Welcome to the program. There are conflicting reports about the Kenya mall attack. On the one hand, some officials have declared that all hostages being held by the Al-Shabaab militants at the Westgate Shopping Center in Nairobi, Kenya, are now free. The quote on the Twitter account of the government's Disaster Operations Center late last night said, "We believe all hostages have been released. Situation of hostiles to be confirmed." There are conflicting reports. Others say that hostage takers are continuing to hold out at the mall. The backstory on this, Lewis, is that more than 60 people have been killed in this assault on an upscale mall, which lasted, really at this point is going into 4 days. The foreign minister, Amina Mohammed, said in an interview with PBS's NewsHour that the Americans were, that two of the individuals involved were Americans 18 to 19 years old of Somali or Arab origin and, quote, lived in Minnesota at one time, Minnesota and one other place at some point. There is also a British attacker who is said to be a woman who has, quote, done this many times before. Those details, Lewis, are also being met with some resistance. Some saying that living or more appropriately residing in Minneapolis does not necessarily make someone an American. I happen to think, Lewis, that the focus that has developed over the last 12 to 18 hours about whether or not these individuals are, by the letter of the law, American is by and large irrelevant.
Right. I'm trying to figure out how that would change the story. I mean, I guess what people are trying to look for is evidence that, well, look, if these were Americans, this could happen here. And, it is just part of that whole thing where other people are just making most of the citizens terrified.
Yeah, and the reality is we know that this could happen here in the United States, and we also know that it doesn't really matter whether you are American or not, that we have a whole host of domestic right-wing terrorism. We, of course, we've had, in the U.S., we've dealt with extremist Muslim terrorism. Other countries have dealt both with American and other terrorism, and it doesn't really tell us anything new. It seems to be one of these sidebars that leads to, it's a similar discussion to me to that of when in the U.S. there is some kind of a violent incident and figuring out, we have conservatives saying, oh, the guy was a liberal. And then we have liberals saying, well, he was like a constitutional conservative. And ultimately, while there may be political influences for many of these things, extremism in any form can lead to violence. And I don't know that to me, the more interesting focus, the more valuable focus here is we have a group here, these Al-Shabaab militants. We have a group here that was by and large considered to be very weak to not say that they had been destroyed because they really hadn't been, but to say that they were very weak seems very accurate. And what we're learning is that even when you significantly weaken extremist groups, you can actually lead them to be even more desperate and then perpetrate attacks like this, which is a completely unhinged taking hostages in a mall. That really seems to be where the focus should be.
Right. I mean, I don't think it really matters how small any of these groups are. If you've got a five-person group, well, five people with a bunch of assault rifles and explosives can do quite a bit of damage.
One of the stories that has come out of this is being reported on Raw Story and elsewhere, and it tells the story of a 4-year-old British boy who was caught up in this entire thing and went up to one of the militants and told him, this is according to the boy's uncle, "You're a very bad man," according to what the uncle told the son. The attacker then is reported to have taken pity on the family and then handed some of these kids a Mars bar and said, "Please forgive me, we are not monsters." The kids were later pictured outside the mall clutching that chocolate bar as a dead body lay behind them. So no surprise, Lewis, that it's been an incredibly gruesome scene. Even now, as we are recording and broadcasting our program, conflicting reports. But I think the most important thing that can be done in the wake of this is don't fall into the kind of pointless but more common conversations that start around these issues, but let's focus on the groups, let's focus on the causes, and let's actually step back and take a look at what is happening globally with violence.
Right. But you know what? That can be really hard to do. I
Yeah.
mean, and then when you get into that, of course, we're talking about the war on terror, which brings up all sorts of other conversations.
Before telling you about this next story, I actually want to play a voicemail that came in over the weekend that I believe implied we weren't going to talk about this story. Take a listen to this voicemail.